As we just discussed, constitutional amendments are plentiful during this legislative session, but there is one by Democratic Senator Richard Martinez that calls for a boost in the state's minimum wage to $10 an hour, and that would increase annually based on inflation. This echoes a call by President Barack Obama, who on Tuesday night in his State of the Union called for an increase in the federal minimum wage, even at one of the most elite gatherings on the planet, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Billionaires raised the specter of more instability arising from growing inequality. I joke a little bit like that much, Sophie. It's no joking matter what the guys in Davos were saying. But to our point here in New Mexico, we have one of the worst rates of income inequality. It's been sussed out by the folks at BBER. The top 20% gaining and the bottom 20%. There's an enormous gap in New Mexico.
There is.
What do we do to fix that, to decrease that? That's the big overall question, but how quickly? There
is a tremendous gap, and the Bureau of Business and Economic Research has done a good job of alerting us to that. I think before we even get to how do we fix that, we don't yet have consensus in this state over the need to fix it, and that is very discouraging. The poverty in this state is linked to pretty much every major issue that we see in front of our legislature right now. The education issues, the crime issue, everything is linked to that. I think practically probably the water and agriculture issues probably are linked to that as well. And so when we don't look at the systemic roots of our poverty problems, and we don't look at the results of those poverty problems, and even worse, when we say it's just wage, we really are failing our population as a whole. That said, raising the minimum wage has been shown across the country as a way to begin to address some of the problems. We see research coming out recently that says just the addition of cash into a household has a tremendous impact on outcomes for children, on outcomes for the family as a whole. That doing that, increasing the amount of money that comes in, has more impact than many of the other programs that we discussed.
I appreciate you saying that, because Eric, when you think about it and the work you've done with Kids Count and stuff like this, I think sometimes we forget that a couple of $100 a month in someone's pocket is a big deal.
It's huge.
A big deal.
Absolutely. In fact, folks who are, living near the poverty level tend to, ironically, spend most of any disposable income, which they have on the basics, which, I'm struck by the fact that the same folks who say we need more people working, we need more jobs, are often the folks who say, but we can't afford to wait. These are working folks. A statistic which we haven't discussed that we track in New Mexico is the number of families in poverty that have at least one full-time employee in the family. We're also at the top of the list. It's 75% of those folks typically in any year, meaning this is not a population that's sitting back collecting public assistance. These are folks who are working 1, 2, and sometimes 3 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet. Now, the economics of it, everybody, I know in some of the stuff we had read was talking about supply and demand. I'm still struck by the fact that most economists will tell you that the demand drives economic growth in terms of this minimum wage issue. Everybody talks about Henry Ford doing this back in the day, and he did it because he was a very shrewd businessman. But he also understood that whether you're a low-wage worker or a aspiring middle-class member, you consume when you make more money, and that spurs the economy. When we're not willing to say that people should be buying more food, more cars, applying for mortgages, and getting themselves out of poverty if they work, then not only are we not doing the sort of the socially responsible thing, but more importantly, we're tanking the economy. And so I just think that I'm shocked we're still having this debate in this day and age that some minimum wage that's not $20 an hour. Nobody's talking about that. I mean, it would be great if we could, but we're talking about $10 an hour. That's poverty level.
And it's consistent, I should say, with what many other states are doing. There's that discussion of like, okay, if New Mexico does this and a state nearby doesn't raise to a similar amount, $10.10 is what we're seeing across the country. Now, we're not seeing it in Texas. I'm not sure that New Mexico has ever aspired to be Texas.
But what we do have, to get Whitney in here, we have municipalities who are deciding on their own to deal with the minimum wage. Right here in Albuquerque, certainly, more famously Santa Fe, which has cracked $10 an hour and is going to be going up this spring, as a matter of fact. In your view, Whitney Wade, What is the deal for you on minimum wage? Would it help people, or is the impact on businesses something you're trying to consider as well? And now that we have Santa Fe to look at, what's your take on how we do it here in New Mexico?
Well, it's funny sitting across the table from Eric and listening to him talk about minimum wage, because this has been an issue that we've been on the city level. And
Right.
Eric has always spoken so well on behalf of raising the minimum wage. I mean, and I like listening to you talk, reminding me of municipal elections in the past. My take is a little bit different. Number one, and I listened to President Obama talk. I missed the State of the Union address. I was on the road, and in the morning he was talking from a Costco, and he was talking about the minimum wage issue. And there were two things that struck me. Number one, how incredibly proficient the Democrats are at moving federal language and federal policy down to the local level. They did it in the last election. So you have President Obama's talking about minimum wage right now at the federal level, and as we come into these elections, and we're taking it on down to the municipal, which is actually they're very good at that. But the other thing is, he was talking a lot about the fact that if you're willing to work full time, that you should be able to support a family. And he kept coming back to this message line. The problem is that $10 an hour is never going to support a family in this country. So, a lot of me wants to just say, get real. If what you're really trying to do is make sure that every worker who's working full time can do that, let's talk about raising it to $25 an hour, because you can't do it on 10. So having said that, I think that the Republicans get wrapped around the axle a lot about debating this 10 cent, 25 cent, $1 increase, because it really isn't doing what you're saying you want to do with it, and it's really not going to affect small business in the way that we're saying it's going to affect small business. Overall,
And that was part of the argument last year in the session. We ended up with, a 30-cent raise, I believe it was, for the minimum wage here after all the Durham stram of how this was going to go. So we have under a minute here. Am I wrong, misreading that the winds are blowing positively for folks for minimum wage right now, given all the it's almost like marijuana. It's just happening in different places. And
My sense of it is that there is a concerted nationwide push for an increase in pay for working families, for folks who are making minimum wages. That push is not just to increase the wage, but also to tie it to inflation so that it continues to go up on a regular basis. And my suspicion is that there will be attempts to create future bumps to try and get it, perhaps not to $25 in the very near future, but to increase it enough that those families.
I've heard that as well, that there's a momentum that has to be started here. That domino has to fall over, and it'll quickly be followed up down the road, as they say.